of the Glencoe meeting of the whole. Let's call order and have a roll call.
Trustee Hollex, trustee Meteropoulos, trustee Underduck.
Here.
Trustee Rosenblatt.
Here.
Trustee Rubin.
Here.
Trustee Scott.
Here.
President Rowan.
Here.
Bill, I'm here virtually.
So that's great, Joe. Trustee Hollex can't be here yet. He's on his way. He was traveling for work. He's asked to participate remotely via Zoom, but the village has established remote meeting policy. As is required under that policy, we have a physical forum here. Does any member of the board object to Trustee Hollex participating remotely? All right, no one objects, so Trustee Hollex can participate fully in this meeting remotely. We are not live streaming this meeting, but the village's video recording will be available on our YouTube channel. Pursuant to the village board's public comment rules, because we have a regular village board meeting at 7 o'clock tonight, same night as we're here, we're not going to have any public comment on non-agenda items during this meeting. That the regular village board meeting starts at 7. If you have a comment on an agenda item that was included on tonight's committee, the whole agenda, I'll ask for comments to be provided when we reach that item on the agenda. At the appropriate time, all comments related to agenda items are limited to 3 minutes. And I'll notify, or Phil will notify the speaker when the time is up. The first issue that we're going to discuss at the committee of the whole is the Preservation Commission's recommendations regarding enhanced preservation incentives. I'll ask the chair of our Preservation Commission, Peter, and Assistant Village Manager Adam Hall to present. Peter, have at it.
Thank you. Can you all talk louder? This is better. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss this here. And it was great to be able to go back and do the YouTube recording of the last meeting, because as I mentioned, several people went in the baggage box and I put really clear enough on this. So it's kind of nice to go back and listen to it. So that was very helpful. One of the questions that came up, why? I want to quote the first chapter of the Preservation Ordinance. The purpose of this chapter is to promote historic and architectural preservation in the village. The village seeks to protect, enhance, and perpetuate those historic structures, buildings, which are valued by the village and its residents, and that are significant to the village's history, culture, and architecture. Why preservation? How is that important? Historic preservation is about caring for our collective cultural memory, expressed in our buildings and landscapes. The sense of loss that we legitimately feel when these are damaged or destroyed is that feeling of separation from our past, and alerts us for mortality and rigidity. That's a quote from Howard Decker, who's writing that who's perhaps for quite a while. When you think about what does it mean to be in a particular place, it's all about memory of that place, what you walk by every day, whether it's the park, the post office, so on. And the buildings and the houses form part of our collective memory of a place. Buildings in Savannah, Georgia were completely different than here, right? Miami is completely different than Chicago. And Glencoe is different than that. And you can struggle with defining what that means, but you understand the differences. And so when you lose one of those pieces of what's forming our collective memory, you do feel lost. You see the old ground and maybe you don't care, but you know what was there and now it's Yes. So. Thank you, Adam. So, let's talk for a minute about incentives. My understanding after a little bit of research is that there's really two buckets of incentives that communities have. One is internal, and it depends on your value system and what morally you feel is the right thing to do, or is like what you feel is the right road, the right path. And you inherently know, no, I shouldn't be at, whether it's against the law or against human rights. You kind of have this compass within you. Another bucket of incentives is all about economics. It's why we get coupons in the mail. It's why the village incentivizes certain things like replacing lead water tubes. That there's that incentive, that economic incentive that's very powerful. So there's kind of these two worlds. And what's interesting, what's interesting, AI is over. What's interesting is that some people are incentivized to become a landlord, and some people are do it from their heart. Now, tonight, what we're talking about is some goals to try to enhance incentives for people to become landmarks, which we can then also some enhanced protections for human lives. So tonight, this is all about encouraging investment, long-term stewardship for historic properties through investments that would require the only apply to certified and honorary landmarks. That's it. No other categories, just those two categories. And through this program, it can support the advancement of historic properties that are not landmarks, maybe nudge them forward to become an honorary person. So if there's enough incentives there, you'll start to say, there's a great story that about 6 weeks ago, a new member of his community who just purchased a house here in Skokie Ridge. And his was doing a lot of work, mostly the interior. But they approached the commission with the intent to certify their house. And they were going to do it because they wanted to approach the state for a tax assessment for each program. Well, we did some research for them, and we also encouraged them to approach the state before they went to the car to see would it be acceptable or qualified. And in that process, they finished their landmark application for the village and sent it around tentatively. But then when they were able to speak with the state, they said, no, there must be not qualified because there have been too many interior changes. Exterior was not touching, but the interior was modified probably in the 1970s. And when you look at the pictures, it's hard to tell what they're looking at. It's so different than what was clearly looked at in the 1930s. So the state said no. And the homeowner said, well, and there's no reason. So that the incentive value is taken away, and they chose, no, we're not going to do this. So clearly in their minds, economic incentives apply. Now, this chart is really tiny. The dates are across the top, and it refers to when the landmark legislation was enacted in 1990. And across the top, there's 2013 and 2025. In 2013, the ordinance was changed so that only the certified landmarks would apply to the state of the tax assessment fees. Okay, up until then, all landmarks could apply, they were all open. So in that first 23 years, 92 properties became designated landmarks. Since 2013, 3 have. Now, the average of 4 per year is a touch misleading because there was a lack in the early years, in the early 90s, 93, 4, 5, it would be like about 10 roughly. And then it dropped back, but 4 is close to average. And now with 3, it's averaging 1 every 4 years, so it's upside down. In terms of demolitions during that time frame, there were 13 in the first 23 years, which is roughly 1 every 2 years. And since 2013, it's approaching 1 a year. So the demolition rate is practically double. Now, for certified landmarks, the first period there was only 5, but that is now there's 7 plus 1 more that will come before you next month that were recommended in the column. So say it's 8. So it's that average is going up. Why? Because there's an incentive economically for the designated landmarks. But not only is that the 8 kind of on the right side, I have been part of landmarks commissions during that time. And I remember each one of those, and I think it's fair to say roughly half of those were done by economics, and the other half were done by the other internal incentives. They felt it's the right thing to do to preserve this house for the area. And so it's really kind of telling what's going on here to me, that when there aren't the economic incentives available, or any incentives, let's say, for the honorary landmarks, the rate is quite low. And so that is one of the real strong reasons why we're here this evening, why we are suggesting the series of incentives that they are. Adam has done a really terrific job digging deeper on these issues. And he's going to take us through the next set of ideas and proposals.
Thank you, Chairman Van Houten. I'd like to begin by expressing my appreciation to the Commission for their thoughtful work over the last several months and completing this analysis with me. It was great to work with them in this process. This evening's discussion will focus on 3 primary areas: financial incentives, zoning incentives, and village code adjustments. A summary of the proposed changes have been provided for you for reference. And as Peter has stated, the overarching goal of this program is to encourage the transition of properties from honorary landmark status to certified landmark status. We'll begin with the financial incentives. The Commission is recommending the establishment of 2 financial incentives: a permanent fee rebate, and a property tax rebate. These incentives would not be retroactive and be limited annually to 4 certified projects to 2 honorary projects village-wide. The permanent fee rebate would be available to both certified and honorary landmarks. The rebate offered for certified landmarks would be 90% of the permanent fee, and the rebate offered for honorary landmarks would be 50% of the permanent fee, with a maximum allowable rebate of $50,000. The rebate permit fee incentive requires an investment by the property owner of $50,000 to get the rebate. Rebates are issued on post-inspection compliance verification. So the property owner will need to show that they've complied with all village codes, as well as a potential incentive agreement with the village to provide that rebate to them. Moving on to the property tax rebate. The property tax rebate will be only available for certified landmarks. The purpose behind this rebate is to encourage honorary landmarks to transition to certified landmarks. The property tax rebate would be up to $2,000 or the minimum value of the property tax paid by the property. for a period of 8 years. It only applies to the village's tax portion, it does not apply to any other taxing body within the village. It again requires a minimum investment of $50,000 by the property owner. And it is transferable to future property owners in the event that the property is sold by the property owner. Moving on to the zoning incentives, the commission's requesting that the village board refer to the zoning board a incentive review of zoning incentives for historic preservation. The purpose behind that is to allow for additional zoning relief for historic homes, sort of an alternative to financial incentives. The property owner could potentially receive flexible setbacks, changes in height if there are bonuses available to that project because they are a historic home. What we are proposing is a open and transparent process, whereas the zoning board will collect feedback from residents as well as property owners throughout the process and draft amendments which will then be presented to the village board at a later date for consideration. In addition, the Historic Preservation Commission is recommending several amendments to the Village Code Chapter 26, which is historic preservation. One of them is the extension of the demolition delay period for honorary landmarks from 180 days to 360 days. The purpose behind this extension for the delay is that it matches peer communities. The assumption being that the village board elects to allow for some form of incentive, either financial or zoning, that would provide for the Preservation Commission to engage with that property in order to discuss potential incentives in lieu of demolition. In addition, there is extensive work that the commission does, as well as the village board does, in establishing an honorary landmark. The commission does some research. The property owner comes in and meets with the commission reviews it with staff, makes a recommendation for an honorary status, which then goes to the village board, which is reviewed by the village attorney, as well as approved by the village board. So there is some effort behind establishing an honorary landmark. In addition, the commission is recommending a code review in regards to the advisory review meeting. At the moment, the code requires that the Preservation Commission host an advisory review meeting for honorary landmarks, but does not require the property owner to attend the advisory review meeting. So we believe that it's an opportunity to allow the property owner to engage with the commission in discussions in regards to issues if they're electing to demolish, engage with the commission to explore incentives or other opportunities out there as well too. In addition, the commission is recommending that the landmark establishment rules for honorary be changed. At the moment, it is at a commission member can recommend an honorary landmark on a volunteer basis, or it's if you're establishing a historic preservation district, is 50% of the property owners establishing district. What the commission is recommending is that we transition from it'd be solely voluntary basically. The property owner would have to voluntarily establish the property as an honorary landmark. I clarified with Attorney Glencoe, there are no current honorary landmarks that are involuntarily in place. They're all voluntarily certified. So we feel like this closes kind of that property concern that the village board expressed at their last meeting, somebody voluntarily being added as an honorary landmark. So that kind of concludes our three areas of discussion in regards to incentives as well as code adjustments. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chairman back to close out.
So what we're seeking tonight is feedback and some hope that we can get going on some of these. We'd like to figure out a way. We're quite sure there are concerns. But what we'd like to do is to figure out how can we pass the concerns and get to something that is meaningful and starts to support preservation in a stronger way that does. I won't go through the statistics again, but we're losing a lot of houses. It gets back to losing our collective sense of place. And it really does come down to incentives. If the incentives are stronger for one group builders, then the incentives drop away for other people. The incentives become stronger, that it's easier to build here, which is very interesting because I've spoken to a number of builders who all commented that this is an easy process versus some of our neighbors. If that's indeed true, then what's our incentive? Is it to go along with that? Is it to level the playing field? What's our incentive on the Preservation Commission? So that, I welcome your thoughts, comments. And again, what I'd like to do is to figure out a way going forward so that we can enact some meaningful change. Thank you.
Well, thanks for the presentations, for the obvious ton of work. And the memo, which was detailed, thoughtful, covered a lot of different subjects. And I appreciate, since this presentation and the memo, and we're here because of your effort, A, to get us off our keister, which I get, but B, you're sort of trying to herd cats because there are, 7 of us, only 6 of us here tonight, and we have sort of differing views. So it's hard to, make everybody happy. Let me throw out, and then we should just, let the trustees weigh in with questions. Let me throw out some random comments about presentations. So first thing, I noticed in the write-up and the sort of canvassing of our needs, and there are some places where they actually have incentive programs. I think Hinsdale is the primary example of that, but then there's 1 or 2 others. And one thing I would want to ask is, the incentive program is not cheap. We don't feel like we're a poor community, but we always feel like we're broke because we can only tap our residents. There are reasons for this, but that we're looking, as we're now all cool, to find other ways. But so one thing is how do they do it in Hinsdale? But the incentive programs seem expensive, so I want to think about that. On the same subject, it seems to me, and I know why you did it, because it was it seems to me the cost of the honorary program seems really high for the benefit. And the reason that is the only thing that the village gets towards preservation, for honorary is we get an increase from 180 days to 360 days for demolition if someone is honorary. And it's pretty expensive for the village to purchase that. And I will note that some of our neighbors, New Trier neighbors, just impose the 360 and don't pay for it. So I wonder about the cost of honorary. Next thing I noticed, though, is our New Trier neighbors, I think this is Kenilworth and that have some not incentives, but sticks to encourage preservation. They've said, yeah, it doesn't really work. So on one hand, I mean, the only stick that actually clearly works is you're prohibited. And that only applies under most of these ordinances, so they have a certified landmark. But that is the fact that the stick of a longer moratorium requiring somebody to attend the meeting isn't particularly effective makes me really wonder how much we're prepared to pay somebody to subject themselves to a stick that doesn't usually work. So I would like, you know, I understand our certified landmarks. It totally works when we have to get people to sign up for it. If someone signs up, we certify they can't abolish. We have to evaluate how much we're prepared to pay, to make it work more, because we're not holding money. We just told some residents on West City Road that among the reasons we were not gonna move the entrance to the parking lot was we were gonna spend another $180,000. And I totally agree with that decision. There were other reasons in addition, but we're counting our pennies here, so we have to think about that. And then one last thing I wanted to mention. And this is gonna go to the zoning commissioner, some board to decide what adjustments we would make for homes that are worthy of preservation in terms of letting them do things they might otherwise not be able to do under the zoning ordinance. It seems to me that's gonna be really complicated, because the purpose of the preservation ordinance is so it continues to look the same. So there are a lot of things we're not gonna be able to do with our zoning adjustments, or it might not look the same. So that strikes me as complicated. Okay, those are my thoughts. I'm personally more willing to oppose some of the sticks, particularly mandatory attendance at a meeting and extending the moratorium from 180 days to 360 days, or 65 days. Without paying something for that, I understand that that's a modest infringement on property rights, because we have a number of neighboring communities that are, not thought to be radical lefties on issues of property rights. I think that's something we can do. I appreciate that there are going to be trustees that they know we should. Okay, that's my spiel. Trustees weigh in, and I'll let people decide what they want to put in. Trustee Scott.
Thank you, President Rowe. Just two comments and a question. I'll start with the question, I think it's easy. The permit fee incentive, I think there's 6 per year at each level.
There are 4 certified minimum fee incentives proposed and 2 honor incentives for a total of 6.
And is it like first in, first out?
Yes.
Okay.
As proposed.
That was the question. Comments, number 1, I think. Preaching to myself because it was a request of the court, but I think it makes good sense for us to pair any of this, however it comes out, with zoning relief. That's an essential part of this package. So it's comment number 1. Comment number 2 is just to echo the comments you made and that President Rowan also made around the tremendous amount of work, I think, that went into this presentation. If President Beckton, Chairman Beckton, if you recently watched the video, it's probably fresh in your mind. We really put you through your paces at the last committee of the whole meeting, and we asked for quite a bit of research and follow-up, and it's so evident that that was done in the space between these 2 meetings, and I just wanted to say I appreciate that. I know you're a volunteer. I know you've got some support from Adam, but I think it's made all the difference. This is a very different look than we had in May. So thank you.
Trustee Griffin.
Let me, because I can't second it, be third, the compliments.
That's why I got it.
To me, this, in terms of the thoroughness, thoughtfulness of the plan. Thank you. Thank you. I
Couple things just up front, I share President Rowan's concern about what, if any, value we get on the incentivizing honorary. Okay. In exchange for saving some money on your permit fees, you'll agree to wait 6 months more later to show up at the meeting. You want to be certified and get the big benefit, which is the tax assessment for it. Get it done. So, which gets to my second point, which is. Right now, you said we've got 12 certified, 7,400. Why do you think people want, they're all voluntary, they're ones that are there, why do you think people are, I know everyone has different reasons, wanted to be honorary landmarks, but certainly don't seem to be willing to take the leap to be certified, which would have been saving them a lot of money based on how high assessments have gone so fast.
When the ordinance first came out, it was a lot easier to become an honorary landmark because it doesn't have all of the other passions. And so you could get the same incentive, the same tax increase, tax assessment increase, both honorary and certified by the state, and many did. One reason the ordinance changed was that houses that received that benefit got toned down. I don't know how many. Actually, it's very hard to trace them, but there's a lot. That was the reason that the ordinance changed, so that only certified because they would go away. The reason why there's hardly any new ones is that there isn't any incentive to do it, other than what you might feel in your heart. Trustee Underhill did it because he felt it was the right thing for that house. So he is 1 out of 3 people over 13 years. Nobody else is doing it. Why not? Now, with the certified, what I found interesting was that it is about half and half about people who feel emotionally strong enough and say, I don't care about the money issue. I want to save this house. It's important for the village. You're gonna see one next month. He feels that way. We were at a house yesterday that they were asking us to look at potentially changing some things as a certified landmark. But they did because they wanted to save the house, not from, it was not a issue. And what's interesting though, is that there are equally people that say, like the house on Hazel that was just landmark, by the tennis courts. That was an economic decision for them. And so having that as the opportunity doesn't mean 100% of the people are going to use it, but it's there and it does push the needle. Also for those people, the inability for the next owner to tear it down is wrong. Right? It's not possible. But what we're trying to do is to figure out, okay, sometimes people don't necessarily want to go all the way to certification. But I think there was something in the proposal that it led to honorary gap in incentive that you were then demolition was prohibited from. What was the 10 years, 8 years?
10 years.
10 years. And so there was a bit of a, it's kind of hidden after you're close to what is there. That it's not a freebie. You are forcing that house to stay there even if you leave. Right, that's what you're doing now, but it's not prohibited. It's usually easier word to say.
To also add to that, the commission wanted to present a package to the village board for discussion. We understand if there might be feelings in regards to honorary incentives versus certified. incentives, and we want to provide an opportunity for the village board to continue to provide feedback on the topic. As Chairman Van Vactor mentioned, there is a covenant restriction in there for the honorary permit incentive. The structure of the program is sort of in draft form, kind of the framework is in the study, but can be adjusted based on feedback from the village board. There's a desire to add a little bit, stick to the incentive, say that if you take the incentive, there is a covenant whereby you can demolish it for 10 years. That's something that obviously we're willing to, include or explore as part of it. So we just want to provide just a framework to the board for feedback.
And just a follow-up question. The village provided incentives that are proposed, those are for those homes that become certified or honorary after we would enter into this program, this new program. Those we currently are don't get these benefits. So if you're doing a renovation,
Yes, at the moment,
interior renovation on your certified home, that's today 1 of 12, you can't apply for, on this program that you're proposing, you can't apply for a building permit rebate.
so we did discuss that. The retroactive to answer your question directly, retroactivity is not proposed as part of this program. In regards to your comments about interior, we had a lengthy discussion about interior. I think a lot of people would agree that utilizing taxpayer dollars to fund interior improvements as an incentive is a problem. So we've phrased it as a renovation / addition, whereby if somebody's adding an addition to their home and are completing interior work as part of that renovation addition, that concept would be part of it. But we did discuss whether or not we would fund solely interior renovation remodels. That's kind of where we landed on some. So we phrased it as renovation additions.
The question has a tricky answer. Because let's say someone has they're selling an honorary house. And the buyer, it's already been landmarked. And the next buyer is contemplating whether to keep it or tear it down. And so I think there's some logic to say, look, if they would add the addition on the back, say some permanent fees, that might swing me more toward keeping that house. If we say that it's only for going forward, that the landmarks that aren't today, I don't know how successful it would really be. And then how would people feel about if you had a house that a landmark and you want to put an addition on, I can't get that incentive because it's already done. That doesn't seem fair. So
Yeah, they're competing
yeah, so
fairness issues.
So I thought when you said not retroactive, all that meant was if you have a project underway,
yes,
we're not looking back and feel bad about it, but we're not looking back. I understood that it would make, if we're doing this, and it's complicated, but if we're doing this, if someone has a landmark that was certified 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and they're now thinking of doing a project, then they would apply if they fall within the first 4. They can do it, and they would get whatever the incentive is. That was what I understood retroactive meant.
I think there's a strong logic for what you just said. Because otherwise, you're gonna have 74 plus 12 very upset people. Property.
So. And I saw that there was some discussion about how we get the money back.
Yeah.
Because, 50,000 here, 50,000 there, pretty soon we're talking real money, and we just had, there's the tier 2 thing for pensions, and every place we look. There are issues about money, so, you know. Not that we wanna constantly play that card, but we have to think about it. So how do we get, how much money, if we did. Suppose we didn't do the honorary part, so that's lesser expense. But suppose we didn't do it, or, you know, I suppose if there were. Here's a question, before I get to it, we didn't do the honorary. How would the 10 years work? When did if there was okay, it's not a permanent, you can't knock it down, it's 10 years, you can't knock it down, when does 10 years start to run? Does it start to run when you certify the house? Does it start to run when you try to sell a house?
I would state, I'm not interested for the record, I would state that I would treat this as a project specific, right? So ideally, conceptually, a property says I am certified to have my property, I'm planning to invest $100,000 in the property. I am seeking a permit incentive as well as a property tax rebate incentive. Or I'm sorry, it's not that I'm seeking a permit incentive. At that time, they would go through an incentive agreement process whereby the proposed improvement would be reviewed by the Preservation Commission. And a determination would be that their proposed improvements would meet the context of the program. Then they would be approved to engage in their improvement. As part of that, they would go through the entire process. At the conclusion of the process, staff would work with the village attorney to develop a demolition covenant whereby they would record against the property that the home could not be demolished. And then over the next 10 years, they would receive they would have the property tax rebate, the home would stay in effect, standing for the next 10 years.
So don't we want historic and architecturally significant properties certified now, even if they're not planning a project? And I'm just a year or two ago, we had a family, maybe the name was Mesereau, and they had a mid-century modern house. And they came in and they said, you know, this is cool. We're prepared to sign up right now to have this be a certified landmark. And I don't think there was anything planned. I think they were in fact thinking, maybe we're gonna sell it. We want it to stay. Done. Under the scheme that's proposed, are we saying, no, we can't, we're not even thinking about that until somebody comes in with a wrecking ball or a plan?
No, I think that the commission strongly encourages preservation. We would like people to certify the either honorary plan. I think the commission had some discussion at our last meeting about efforts to outreach the community to encourage those types of certifications. But really, the goal of the program essentially is to encourage those that may not have it within themselves to do so financially or zoning related to potentially certify.
Okay, so let's suppose we're talking, there's gonna be some money spent by us with incentives, property tax incentives, project related incentives. That money's gonna add up. How much does that cost? And how do we get it back? And I saw there was some discussion of that. What is Hinsdale do? How much does it cost them? How do they get it back?
So Hinsdale is open-ended. I had a few conversations with their staff. They initially began the program, and their expenditures for the first year is approximately $13,000. The next year, the program is $130,000 for the permanent incentive program and discussions with their staff. It's incredibly popular. They do receive a lot of inquiry from builders themselves who are market homes. They work with real estate agents to encourage investments as well and items like that. The concern that I heard from their staff, to be frank, is they're worried that they might be outpacing their expectation for for a draw, and that they generate about the same revenue as we do, about 1.7 to 1.8 million dollars. Our financial projection is about 1.9 million over the next 5 years. And for permanent, and so they're similar to us. And they're seeing a reduction in revenue of $130,000. It is, don't have any caps on it. We took that language and we kind of had a conversation about it, and we've kind of instituted some caps. There's caps on projects, there's caps on, total expenditure for an incentive. I think those caps are flexible. There's a concern about, overextending ourselves, and I think we would work with our finance team to establish, something that would make the board feel comfortable in establishing some form of incentive.
Does Hinsdale have a way? Well, let me say, you have charts, and the charts show more than 130,000. And you can see how to get there. How does Hinsdale have a way to get the money back? Okay. And I saw some ideas about how he would get the money back. Which included larger fees, which the certified folks, they wouldn't really be paying, so everybody else would be paying. That immediately reminded me of something our retired colleague trustee Lister said, which is, how's that gonna fly? People who get to pay the bill. And it's complicated. It's not, this is not easy. Because we do want to save identified landmarks, historical, architectural, we do. But, and what we're hearing is that the sticks, like mandatory attendance at a meeting, delay and demolition up to a year, that doesn't actually work. People say, yeah, okay, clock is running, day 366, wrecking ball comes in. So that doesn't work. But it's, you know, it's, and this sounds like it's gonna be really expensive. And, you know, how do we, and I wanna make sure we get something for it. I can, if we pay through permit fees or taxes, we need to be able to say, yeah, you want to bulldoze it, too bad. Yes. You know, and then the question is, how do we pay it?
Mr. President. Yeah, I'd like to clarify something. I believe, thank you, I want to clarify something. I believe all the things that are recommended are used somewhere here in northeastern Illinois, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And so we're looking at just improvements, or I'll call them regulations or incentives that are already being used in other communities in northeastern Illinois.
Yes, that's correct.
So the issue that I'm hearing is I'm trying to take temperature. There's more of an interest in perhaps some things that do not have a large financial impact on the owner, rather and then also not I'll call overregulation, but something like that. One of the things I've stumbled on recently is something called preservation easements. They're administered through the state, and they do cover the exterior of the building, and they do have an impact on the assessed valuation of the property overall. But there's that may be another thing we can investigate. But part of the reason behind this meeting is to kind of take the temperature of the board on some of these ideas. And some of them maybe need a little more work.
We should recognize that there's a cost impact. That's why there's 3 concepts floated to how we'll start to recoup that cost. It is also interesting on reflection that the village is already incentivizing older homes. People that want rights. That's a great program. It's a 50% match in cost within the kind of thing. And by definition, they're all older homes. You have a lifetime, probably approval. Or something. And so it's already the examples are already there. And I think the question is like of degree. And what we're trying to do by setting these examples out there is just move the discussion, maybe 50,000. 50,000. Well, what I liked about that was the chart that I showed you, is that the rates are not that great. For certified landmarks, it's one every year, 1.5 years. And so Adam's analysis to show year after year, I think it's reasonable to ask, would it really be that high of a rate? Landmarks. I also think right now, without any non-incentives, it becomes very difficult to convince people to do this. So, commission would like to do ways since the pandemic. We've already sent out a letter out to all landmark homes and thought better of it, so we can. Okay, so things that if we were to go read a program, then this would be a really strong retail program existing landmarks. And it can be then used to talk with realtors and developers to start to educate them and let them know there's alternatives to mobile. Especially right now, you're right, there are some builders who don't care. They have one goal in mind. And so I mentioned earlier, they like the village because it's a smooth sale. SAIL. And so we appreciate the comments very much. And I'm not sure what its goal is. I like the degree of thought and questions. And I'm personally hearing some openness. I'm not hearing no. But it sounds like there's more refinement needed. But I also would hope that we continue this process, but a little faster. Because every time 3 more months goes by, there's a few more wrong. And whether they're closer to something, I imagine you have to move on to the next agenda. Question came up in the last meeting that we had a couple of times. Why should we care? There's a great role. If we wait much longer, it won't matter anymore. It won't be anything left. And I think that's true. When you talk to older people who live here their whole lives, they talk about the way it used to be. And they're not talking about whether they could buy ice cream. They should talk about what it's like walking down the street. And when you have large homes, people tend to interact less with their neighbors. Large homes and large lots. Versus, let's say, think about Wilmette Evans and Spencer. There's a little bit more commonality felt. And that's not a strong point, but it is it's a reality. So when the houses get bigger and bigger, or spending their assets. And this gets to the goals of the plan commission, the targets plan to talk about these things. It's ingrained in the village code. So I feel like there's a duty to move this forward and figure out a solution. Really do. That's why we're working this hard on the CCR. We feel the same. But if we get a read from the board that you're not trying to mobilize everything, training the predator hunter. The incentive for us to be hard to evaporates. Wonder what we do. So I'm pleading with you, let's find a path. Then let's make this work.
Okay. I get the point. I'm always taking the temperature of the board as I'm listening to this. Not just of myself, but of the others. I think we are interested. But it's really complicated. Here's some things based on, and so I think we should keep working on this, and here are some things that I sort of took away from this. We need to know a little bit more about what the zoning fixes might look like that would and encourage preservation, but not cause residents' heads to explode if they're next door to these things. I'm not positive. I don't necessarily understand what those are. So maybe we need to flesh that out a little bit, but I think that's certainly something we're interested in. And it has the advantage of, I mean, it could affect neighbors and we care about that. That's what the zoning board cares about. And first and foremost, you can't ruin your neighbor's life by building something horrible next to them. So that's one thing. Second thing is, aside from you can't demolish, okay, what are the other sticks? And I hadn't focused, it's probably in there, but I haven't focused on does it make sense for a lesser than certified, call it honorary, gets, in my view, 360-day demolition. I'm not prepared to pay for that. You know, from my point of view, we could be like our future neighbors do. But if there is some kind of a temporary demolition ban, maybe, but I don't understand how that works. So I want an idea of, okay, I'm not wedded, by the way, as far as I'm concerned. If we don't really get anything out of an honorary at this point, then we can jump it and have a single thing that provides the stick we want, the carrots we can afford. If there is a benefit to having honorary, okay, what control does the village get? What are we paying for? And then the last thing I'll say is, this is 2 points. How much are we prepared to pay? And what's the right amount that's going to be not too much so we can't afford it, but enough to actually incentivize the right behavior we want. I don't want to pay anything if the only people that are going to take it are people who weren't planning on demolishing it, but they're going to just get some benefit out of the village. And by the way, we have an entire village filled with Sharpies who will figure that out. And so we have to find some number that is going to be sufficient to cause someone who's thinking of knocking over their house to instead do something else. But it's not so much that we are going to choke on it because we can't afford it. So I'm not positive what that number is. And then the last thing is, okay, well, how are we paying for this? And there were some ideas in the memo. But, and if we're not paying for it, we have a good idea of what the amount is, so we can decide if we can stand it. Maybe that means, you know, I looked, I said, well, right now it's 50,000 is the cap. Would it work if it was 25? Because that would save us money. And the answer is maybe it wouldn't work. Maybe that wouldn't be enough for somebody if they're gonna knock it down their house. Not bad. Okay, those are things that I'm concerned about as we move forward, and I think the board is to.
Just a couple clarifying questions and approaches, just want to make sure if there's some feedback. In regards to the zoning, is there consensus and to refer to the zoning board to have the discussion? Well, my fear is the preservation commission doesn't, obviously doesn't have experience, but the zoning board more typically speaks to zoning issues. Is that something where the preservation commission can prepare for it?
I think whatever ideas the Preservation Commission has thought of, then, yeah, it's fine to go to the zoning board, and they have a pretty good idea of what, you know, they know what they're dealing with most of the time, and maybe they'll know how this will play out. So, yes, but they should get the benefit of the zoning board, should get, or the commission should get the benefit of the ideas that we have.
So, Mr. President, Ron, if that's the case, I think what we need to do is to present to the board, at a board meeting, formal referral to the zoning commission, and all of those kinds of structural points can be made, and can be a dialogue that takes place between the Preservation Commission and the zoning commission as that recommendation would come back. So we can prepare that for next month.
Good.
Like,
Yeah, that's good.
For clarity on that issue. The Preservation Commission did meet with the zoning board about 2 years ago on this exact issue. Had a formal conversation about it, presented the ideas. Chad. It's 2 years ago, so my memory was that the chair was pretty supportive. There was discussion on the zoning members. Or it would be a fairly easy thing to pull that back and resume discussion. There's been a lot of work done already. My memory was that it was not necessarily issues about what you do to the looks of the historic property. It's one of the fundamentals of judgment, is what you see from the look of the paper. And so this is more focused on what historic properties have the site, ruling their site, put an addition on the back, presented. Because modern life is different than what it was when this house was built. That time, everybody wanted to live in front of the house. Today, everybody wants to live in the back of the house. It's simple. And so you have these concepts of creative groups and so on. Vacation back in on the back of the house. And so there's a logic to say, okay, free up some flexibility in the back or more add-ons to these homes. And that doesn't touch some yard setbacks, height, so on. And there's a lot of examples of the village that do that. But so it's a fairly straightforward process to resurrect that.
Okay, so we're ready to, and what the zoning commission would do then is come up with, okay, here are the possible fixes where we would allow, you know, greater variance, because this is accommodating historic home. then they could, you know, they get specific, and it's gotta be in the back. So you can't be on top of your neighbors, maybe get a little bit more, anyway, that's fine, that's sensible. So, that's straightforward, that's not, getting it right can be hard, but that's not the hardest conceptual thing, the hard conceptual thing is it worth it to have this second category honorary, and if so, how much is gonna cost and what are we gonna require them to do? And then with the certified, when does it apply and what's the right number? And that's hard, that's always gonna be hard for us, that just is.
If we're combining. For example, somebody might not know all the certified, but they might do honorary, with some kind of. Zoning allowance to do an improvement in that. That effectively gets us where we want to be with some. Whatever it is, and for a decade you can't tear the house down, and oh yeah, by the way, if you do ever tear the house down. That zoning incentive vanishes and you're back to where you would have been. For whoever knocked the house down. Things like that. Which, just on its face, don't cost us any money. But yet preserve the house. I think could actually be a useful category, because. Let's face it, there aren't, the people that are certifying their house as being, that's it, I don't ever want anybody to tear this house down, are few and far between. Personally, given what the costs are, talking about rebating 90% of 3.5%. The cost of a renovation. Gosh, that's pushing me over the edge. I think so. So with all due respect, I mean, I think it's thoughtful and I like the idea of trying to give incentives, but. We're spending a lot of money, but in little bits and pieces that I don't know that are material. But to the average person that are making these decisions. But you look, somebody put a nice addition on the back of their house. That they don't get to do otherwise. That's material, so. Things like that, I think could be the driver to get more people to sign up.
There could be a combination in there as well.
Sure.
The gentleman, Hazel, the recent vendor. Brought up permanent fee cost for that if you pay, and it's substantial. And frankly, touched on the second level, the certified ones are not the ones generally. Obviously, they're not only. So if you put all the incentive, what needs incentives? Really? The honoraries, they're the ones generally. But then if you say it's only them, then that's not very simple. So that's by both of these, and by having it at a certain level, maybe somebody's incentivized to go up to that level. Which is the ultimate goal. Yet, because there's no incentive at the current honorary. More zoning flexibility or more FAR, whatever. Is something that does make a difference. What DAOs do as well. So maybe there's something between this, I don't know.
Anything else? Is this enough? I mean, I agree with trustee Rubin's points. We just don't know if, and the guy on Hazel, he didn't knock down the house. Right, he paid the extra money that he was able to do modeling, and to trustee Rubin's point, maybe it would be allowed sort of more pay to say that that'll help. And what we don't want to do is subsidize somebody who's not actually planning on knocking it down. And the question is, can we even though it cost us a bunch of money, is that a sufficient subsidy to really affect somebody who wants to knock it down? Because they can increase the value of this thing by $1 million. That's why it's complicated. Okay, I think we've covered it. It continues to be hard, and we continue to be serious about it. There are a number of things that I think we're already prepared to do. The hardest part is, okay, we're doing financial incentives. What's the right number? Can we, and how do we afford it? Okay, thank you for, it's a ton of work. It's one of the harder, okay, water is really hard. That's a really hard project for us, but this is one of the hardest and most complicated projects. We appreciate all the hard work working on this for village for it. Thank you. Okay. All right, so the next item on the agenda is a discussion of residential network fiber installation, and I'll ask our Public Works Director, Monica Sarna, and our Assistant Village Attorney, who was to present on this. George Nicolopoulos probably wanted to be here for this. She's in police, but she pointed out to me that this is potentially complicated, and in past life working in the city was able to leverage this kind of thing for its benefit. So we wanted to hear about how this is going. Monica.
All right, thank you. We're coming to you with information on new development that began late last year, when we began being contacted by fiber installers, many of which are residential fiber service provider, which would be an alternate to existing services that are provided now. However, one was an end service provider, making connection through Glencoe, and they would offer no services to Glencoe residents nor Glencoe itself. So as these fiber installers started contacting us about performing work in Glencoe, we began consulting with our attorneys to help us guide us through the process. It has been many years since Glencoe had full utility built out, and we needed to revisit the process. What we've learned as we continue to move these conversations to and the fiber providers is that most of Chicagoland and honestly other urban areas throughout the country are being targeted by these fiber. There's a race to the finish mentality, which basically means even though we've been contacted by multiple fiber service providers, that doesn't mean that they all can provide the same service within Glencoe. The first one to be permitted is the one that ultimately provide alternate service to our residents. So there's that race to the finish mentality. So once one is permitted, all the others will to performing working. The other agreement has helped us and other communities understand our rights for use in the public right of way. With telecommunication companies, and we're creating a standard licensing agreement. This is aimed at having the following two goals. So one is to protect our existing utilities within the right of way. And the second goal is to lessen the construction impacts to our residents during the actual build out. So the standards which are currently being finalized focus on three main areas. A level of service for our customers and for municipal facilities, permit application requirements and time limits, and supplemental construction and restoration requirements. By creating a uniform standard, we're supporting kind of our state mandated requirements to only impose reasonable terms for use in our right of way. And we're limited in our ability to charge ongoing fees for our use in the right of way. But we will be able to continue to collect the simplified telecommunications tax, which would apply to these fiber installers since they are registered telecommunications company. So I'm gonna turn it over to Stu to see if he wants to kind of explain kind of the legal side of this conversation, and then we'll open it up.
Before Stu, maybe he's gonna answer this. If we think whoever the first one is, exclude the one that just passed. But we're talking about the ones that are intending to serve Glencoe. I understood you to say the first guy in, nobody else is going to be interested. If that's true, do we have any ability to impact who gets to do this? Or are we sort of, do we just have to let the first one in without problem?
So. Yes, I would like to. It's not, thank you. Okay. And I don't mean to be facetious, but it's a little bit, it's important to understand the history of, how we got to where we are. In general, municipalities have, a great deal of authority over their own streets and the rights of way. They can set restrictions on how and when the streets can be opened up. They can have very strict permitting requirements. But the ability to require or to award a franchise, an exclusive franchise. And I'm going to use the term license and franchise, and I'm going to use them in distinct ways. Although you can have a non-exclusive franchise, generally a franchise is an exclusive right to do a specific type of business that is awarded to a private entity. So when you have, for instance, many ways we have a waste hauling franchise that we've awarded to Lakeshore for residential pickup. No other waste hauler can come and do single family residential pickup in the village. They have exclusive franchise. That is a power that is granted to municipalities. The ability to grant an exclusive franchise for telecommunications, that has been, that power has been denied by the General Assembly. And the idea behind that is that telecommunications is a space where there's a lot of innovation, is a space where technology changes over time, and that providing consumer choice has been determined to be a priority by the General Assembly. And so our ability to constrain or say that only one provider can use our rights of way has been limited. The General Assembly said that for telecommunications providers, you have to provide them equal access. Now, one of the issues is that we have a mature built environment. This is not a greenfield development in the middle of Texas. This is Glencoe. This is a place that has small rights of way, that has private rights of way, that has older facilities in general, whether it be our water or sanitary sewers. And so we have a definite interest in making sure that our right of way is preserved, is used in a rational way, and does not lead to conflicts or disruptions of service. So we cannot deny, we cannot say, pick the one that we want and say you're in, everybody else out. And we also cannot, the other limit that we have is we cannot say, go into the bidding war and say whoever pays the most gets to be here, and we just charge you here every year. The municipalities are explicitly denied the power to do annual or periodic license fees. We have a simplified municipal telecommunication tax that we're authorized to collect, and that is what that's what we're about to do. So, given those limitations, what we've done in working with Monica and James, and then a few of our other clients, is say, okay, can't pick favors. We can't do a bidding war. Well, what if we ask for a level of service and also a level of quality of work that is sufficiently high that it actually meets the village standards, and lock these producers into that, where they have to come in, they have to do the work within a certain amount of time, or they lose their permits. They have to finish the work and actually do the restoration up to our standards or lose their permits. They have to have a minimum number of cuts. They can't have long, they have to do directional board or jack. They can't do open trench work. We're locking anyone who wants to come in into robust agreements to do work in the way that Glencoe would expect them to be done. If someone comes in and does that, that's about all we do. And we assume that if someone's going to do the investment to do the work the right way, that they'll also be doing business the right way. But I guarantee that we're going to get the absolute best provider. No, but at least we know that we're not going to have disruptions in service. We're not going to be using a disproportionate amount of building staff, time, and resources to be chasing after conflicts when they bullseye water main or something like that. And we believe that's the best way to do this. We also think that this will weed out some more fly-by-night folks. The amount of calls that municipalities are getting right now, we finally actually, Monica got out of a call, and we just asked her, like, what's going on? Just we talking to one of the team, we're like, what is going on here? And it turns out that with the new administration in Washington, they are actually canceling a lot of the broadband infrastructure that's going to rural areas. That money's expired, and these companies are basically swooping in, taking federal dollars, federal loans, and also PC money, and basically redirecting their full force to suburban markets. We can have a side discussion about whether we think that's good policy or not, but that is why we have a number of companies that are basically taking money that was in another pot, pushing it out to the suburbs. So this is happening all across the country, and definitely all across kind of the outer suburbs of Chicago.
Can we create a process where we tell all these folks submit at the same time so we can look over this at the same time?
What we are recommending doing is we have prepared a form license agreement that Monica is the first one to see of all of our clients. We're going to take feedback over the next few days to that. And then we recommend basically that every single one of these provide that every one of our clients send out for every provider that has contacted them simultaneously. And you sign on the dotted line, you get your permits in, we will review them at the same time. I do not expect that every provider will agree to these terms. And I think that some of them will decide whether or not it's worthwhile. And so I think there will be a natural win-win gap.
So we don't have another village that's done this yet, that's set the bar for, say, service. So a service level agreement and a list of items that basically.
No,
There's
every,
we're established.
yeah, we're establishing that, through all of our previous clients, and then, we're working with some other communities and state areas, so.
There's nothing to copy.
Well, what's interesting is that there is a set of kind of write-up, there's an Illinois needs to be like public right of way construction standards ordinance that was adopted in the mid-2000s, and it has been updated since then.
That's construction.
And well, this is, I mean, this is,
Let's just precedent.
there is a precedent, and, but I don't wanna say that this is dumb money, but it is dumb money, that is being poured into this industry right now. And, honestly, we wanna make sure that if dumb money is coming in, that it's gonna be forced to use smart installation.
I would just add, this is something that I'm dusting off part of my brain, when all of this changed back in the mid-2000s. It related really primarily to cable television competition, and AT&T was able to get legislation through Springfield that essentially removed the requirement for a local franchise. So we still have, for instance, with Comcast, a local franchise agreement. They don't have to do that, but they have continued to do so. We're actually going to need to bring that back to the village board sometime, I believe, before February of next year for a renewal. That all comes back to when the INL put forward that model ordinance. And it's, I think it was 2005 when the INL shared that. 2007 when the legislation officially shifted. What's interesting is, as we've had some of these conversations with these providers, they recognize this as a bit of a race, right? And there are comments that have been made relative to the ability for the village to utilize that network, to connect all of our public buildings, including schools, park district facilities, and others, onto that fiber network. Those kinds of conditions are what we want to try to explore as it relates to where there could be an added benefit to the community as a whole. We hear frequently from residents who are frustrated by Comcast service, by the cost of Comcast, that having alternatives available to them would be appreciated. There are minimal alternatives available right now, so this is a unique time. I mean, I've never seen, 4 unique providers call us within, weeks of one another saying, we're interested in doing a full door-to-door build out of a fiber optic network. And that is a significant, substantial outlay of capital. And they're eager to do so. So I think to Stu's point, what we want to make sure is that we include within those model licensing agreements all of those best practices. We're not the only ones dealing with this. This is right now the issue across the entire Chicagoland region. There are communities that have inked deals with some of these providers, and by inked deals, I mean have either utilized the licensing agreement or a right-of-way agreement of some sort. Most of those are in the far western suburbs, middle western suburbs. Not a whole lot happening in this area yet, but we know that's coming. So again, given the fact that this is something that we haven't talked about in a very long time, we want to make sure we brought it up to all of you. Stu, we haven't really talked too much about next steps, but maybe that's a good thing to just kind of touch on relative to what we may bring back to the board.
Yeah, I mean, next steps will be that we'll be sending out these agreements and setting our terms with the various providers that have reached out.
Next steps is what is on the section, so
There we go.
but you can. I can, so yeah, just to review and update the regulations, of what we want to include in a standard license agreement. So just to be clear, this is on top of what is already in our ordinance. So we're just kind of adding to what is already in our ordinance, what's already required. This is above and beyond that. To your question, we will provide the standard license agreement, copy of it to all of the interested parties at the same time, and to set the timeline going forward and create fairness. And then those who would agree to our standards, they just need to make it through the permitting process. And we'll just have to make sure we're meeting those turnaround times, on a fair basis, as far as the permitting comments. So again, you know, if it's a high quality permit submittal, they may be able to get through 1 or 2 reviews. If it's poor quality, you know, it may take them a longer time to get through our reviews process. But how we feel like it's a fair system.
I want to segue off of the providing service to Glencoe and focus on one provider who wanted to go through Glencoe. So trustee Nicolopoulos had asked about the possibility that we have different greater rights in that circumstance. Do we have different and greater rights in that circumstance, and do we take advantage of that?
I honestly missed the crux of the question.
That's
So-
my fault. Sorry about that.
So, we've been talking about, providers, and there are a number of them who want to wire up Glencoe, just like Comcast Xfinity has done. And that sounds great, because it would be lovely to have competition, the best way market's supposed to work. But I understand that one provider has come to us and said they want to run fiber optic cable from somewhere to somewhere going through Glencoe. That's not a traditional, cable provider. And trustee Nicolopoulos has said that perhaps the village would have greater rights and could maybe extract more in that circumstance. But that's a legal question. Fortunately, our lawyers.
And we are looking at that under the classifications of these, types of providers are governed by the Illinois Commerce Commission. And they get certified as different entities with different rights. We are looking at that specific issue. And, whether we are able to treat someone who's basically using us as a means of transit as opposed to being a retailer. In principle, that sounds like something we should be able to make a distinction on. But there is a possibility that how the state classified them may have trump everything. And so we're looking at that issue.
Okay,
Question.
trustee Young.
I know this is considered pretty much cutting edge technology, but will we need to build in some concern, one, about inflation? Thinking a lot about inflation these days, where if we do get a payment, it's not just one time, maybe it could be a flow of funds.
That when I was talking about the state is specifically preempted, is our ability to get regular payments.
Yeah.
Can't do that. So, but because we do get a regular local tax flow from them, we can't charge an ongoing or regular charge.
You cannot.
And not.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that-
Good idea.
No, well, I think one of the policy behind that was that, if companies are making this investment, then they're in with us, they're stuck with us. And that, the state legislature did not want that installation basically becomes something that we can extract revenue out of.
Okay. One other question. Are there any legacy issues with this? Say Musk or somebody comes up with super fast satellite internet connections and you don't need it anymore.
I literally saw something today where, Starlink lobbyists in Mississippi were arguing against this type of installation. Because they said that fiber will be absolutely obsolete in 5 years, and we'll all be walking around with Starlink, upload panel on our cars and our laptops and possibly on top of our heads. But, you know, at this point, I think fiber is considered, fiber is a technology that's been extremely resilient. And it has its actual capacity as they figured out how to put more information in photons over the decades, which is fascinating to me. In the end, this is conduit. So it's tight and there's always a possibility of abandoned conduit. You know, there's a lot of unused stuff sitting under our curb.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to talk about this? Okay, you have enough, it sounds like you have a plan, is there enough guidance? So to Joe Hallback's question about can we piggyback off of any of our neighbors? Elrod Friedman is doing this, Elrod Friedman is doing this for everybody, Phil and I just had a meeting with our state senator, and she was sort of, I don't remember what the subject was, but it's like, well, Elrod Friedman doing this for all you guys. So we are taking advantage of our neighbors because they're all using it. So, and by the way,
I wouldn't say taking advantage of that. That's not how we put it.
we're getting through the nose. All about it. And our village manager talked about how he sort of, this reminds him of back in the early 2000s, when he was looking at this. When I was way younger in the 1980s, one of my first big projects for the village was working with a young lawyer named Steve Elrod, and we did Glencoe's cable TV ordinance, and we met with and interviewed the 6 companies that were competing, and we signed one up, imposing all kinds of restrictions and what have you. We specifically didn't choose a company called TCI, that became Comcast. TCI promptly bought the outfit that we had chosen, and then the feds and state stepped in and said, all that stuff you did, forget it.
That's right.
So
Was that when Steve and all
We did have some long interest.
no, he didn't.
But he picked up that next part.
But he wasn't, you know, he and I were both young guys at the time. And we worked really hard and it all got vaporized by it. Okay. We've covered preservation, we've covered this fiber issue, look into the pass through, we have a plan for the ones that are not passing through. Is there any other business for our municipal? If not, is there a motion to adjourn? We have another meeting in 17 minutes.
So.
Been moved and seconded, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried, the meeting of the whole adjourned, thank you, everybody.